now available in paperback and e-readers. Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. The goddess next door takes on the threat of a deadly digital diva driven to destroy the world in this action-packed, all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess featuring a bonus pin-up and the other 2 books in the Cyber Goddess saga at online bookstores everywhere today. 3 people, including a 4-year-old girl who was shopping with her parents, were shot and wounded in Times Square, the heart of New York City, when 2 brothers who were having a beef decided to have a shootout in the middle of Times Square during the day. Now, many people see this incident that took place in Times Square, the heart of New York City, as an isolated incident in New York's ongoing increasing crime wave. But when I take a critical examination of that shootout that took place in Times Square, where this 4-year-old girl was shot and wounded, I see yet another incident in America's ongoing man crisis. And when I take that critical examination of those 2 brothers that participated in that shootout in Times Square, I see a pair of beta males like I describe in my book, The Man Crisis, because both of these males clearly fit the pattern and profile I talk about as related to beta males in The Man Crisis, and their lives fit several chapters that I talk about in The Man Crisis, such as homelessness and the man crisis, because both of these brothers came from single-room occupancy hotels that were on 31st Street, and they were hustling and peddling on the streets of Times Square, and they had a beef between each other. And as they were having this beef between each other, it's clear that both of these men did not get any sort of conflict resolution skills when they were growing up. And because they didn't get any sort of conflict resolution skills, you had one brother who wanted to go out here and take out a gun, and acting on impulse, fired it at his brother, not thinking about anybody around him because he was so caught up in his feelings about whatever issues he had with his brother that he didn't think about the health and safety of anybody else in the middle of that square in broad daylight. And that clearly shows that this beta male really did not have good critical thinking skills, because if he was thinking critically, he would understand that going out here and taking out that firearm and shooting at his brother in the middle of Times Square was going to make life worse for him than it would be for whatever issue he was having with his brother. Now, I understand that this pair of brothers was going through a hard time because they were possibly homeless and were living in an SRO hotel, and they were probably really frustrated about the state of their lives. But in that case of survival, you really have to think critically, because you can go from being in the shelter system to the prison system if you don't know how to think critically. But because this brother was acting impulsively, he wound up making his life situation even worse than before. And that's all because he was caught up in his emotions and really was not thinking critically about how his actions have consequences. And now he's gone out here and participated in actions that are going to lead to him suffering, because now that he has gone out here and participated in a shooting in the heart of New York City and the crossroads of the world, once law enforcement finds him, he is sure to not only be arrested, but to be made an example of by the criminal justice system, because your New York City is a major travel and tourism area, and in order to make people feel safe, they are going to make an example out of this guy by putting him inside of the Rikers Island system, where he's going to have to deal with not just trying to survive in the hotels of the homeless system, but now he'll be dealing with the Rikers Island prison system and dealing with Bubba and Tiny. And that's a really bad place to be, because once you're in that cage, you're practically bound by the rules that the COs set, and you're also having to deal with these dangerous predators that lurk inside of a cage like Rikers Island. So this guy made his situation even worse because of him acting impulsively. And what was really sad about this whole situation is that it was his own brother who wound up flipping him, and that really shows how bad things can get when you become a man in crisis. Because when you become a man in crisis, what happens is that when you're on the streets, there are no allies, and you can't even trust a brother in some cases. And because this brother had an issue with his brother, he's looking at going into the prison system for the next couple of years, because those assaults with a deadly weapon, those are felonies that are going to have this guy locked up for years. And he's going to have to now not just deal with his brother anymore. He's going to be dealing with Bubba and Tiny. And that's the sad part, because if he just thought critically and didn't act so impulsively, he wouldn't have gone out here to try to kill his brother and wind up wounding all of those innocent people. But this is what happens when beta males go out here and act on their feelings without understanding that a man has to think. They go out here and participate in these extreme acts of violence. Now, this extreme act of violence has more people out here still talking about gun control, but the gun control issue has nothing to do with this increase in violence that has accelerated over the last couple of months. No, this has to do with these beta males going out here and going to explode in rage, because after we had the lockdowns of the COVID-19 pandemic, many of these beta males became idle hands, and as those idle hands and idle minds sat there, they started crafting plans in the devil's workshop. And as these men crafted their plans in the devil's workshop, they were waiting for just the right time to go out here and participate in their acts of violence. And what we're seeing here in this country is an acceleration of the man crisis, because your government, as they established these lockdowns to combat COVID-19, they wound up speeding up the clock on many of these beta males. And now that society is opening up again, many of these men are stepping out into the world as their idle minds have all of this time to simmer and boil in anger. And now many of these men are exploding in these rages and acting impulsively. And that's the reason why we have this escalation in violence and this increase in frequency in violence. And no gun control law is going to stop beta males like this, because I'm sure that the beta male who had this gun in this situation, he probably got that gun illegally. So that's not going to work with these beta males, because the problem is not the guns. The problem is the way we have raised boys to become men in this country. And because we have raised boys to become extremely dysfunctional males in this country, they don't have the life skills to know how to navigate the world as men. And because they don't have those male life skills to know how to navigate the world as men, such as critical thinking skills, the ability to use logic and reason, the ability to problem solve and conflict resolve, many of these males, they are just as emotional as a female. And because they are as emotional as a female, they act on their impulses. And that's a dangerous combination to have when you have a male who has the emotions of a female, but is as strong or can use a weapon like a male. Because when you have a male who is emotional like a female and he can use weapons like a male, what happens is whenever he's upset, he takes out that weapon and he looks to do harm to others over issues that a man who has logic and reason, critical thinking skills, and conflict resolution skills and problem solving skills would not act on those feelings, because he understands he has more to lose if he acts on those feelings. So that's what we saw in Times Square, and this situation was made exacerbated by this beta male, again being in a situation where he was homeless and dealing with other issues, and he was stressed. And this was also led to this guy acting impulsively because he probably did not have those male life skills or those male survival skills. And because he didn't have those survival skills, he wound up putting people in jeopardy because he did not know how to conflict resolve, because he did not have the skills in order to work as with his brother. And again, when you have a family unit that is broken, this is what leads to a lot of violence in places like New York City and even other parts of the world. And what we saw in Times Square was not a gun issue, it was a man issue. And sadly, most people here in America, we keep trying to deflect to the gun issue because we don't want to deal with the man issue, because dealing with the man issue means we have to hold females accountable for the dysfunctional way they have raised boys over the last 50 years, and admit that the welfare state and the establishment of the single-parent, female-headed household in the United States was a complete failure. And to admit this would mean a certain political party would have to admit that its policies were complete failures, and that's something many on that side of the aisle don't want to do, because it was their policies that socially engineered these 2 to 3 generations of beta males that have been terrorizing the country for the last 50 years and have gone out here and escalated their violence over the last decade. And as they have escalated their violence over the last decade, most people want to deflect by talking about gun control. But the problem is, if you don't have a father in the home to teach a boy self-control, you're going to have a series of ticking time bombs all across the country. And these ticking time bombs, once they go off, they wind up doing harm to others, because again, it's not a matter of if this guy is going to go off, it's a matter of when he's going to go off. And no gun control law can stop a beta male, because once you have a beta male who is just caught up in his emotions and wants to do harm to someone, he's going to do harm to someone, whether he has a firearm or a vehicle, or even one goes out here and learns about building different weapons all over the internet. This guy is a dang clear and present danger, but America, again, does not want to acknowledge the problem with the man crisis in this country, because acknowledging the man crisis in this country means acknowledging that many of the policies we have implemented are failures. And sadly, most Americans don't like to admit failure, but they don't understand that if we don't admit failure, we can't grow and do better, because the only way we're going to solve this man crisis is with an investment in men and an effort to rebuild America's males into stronger men, and the kind of men who can handle any sort of trouble and overcome any sort of crisis. Now, if you want to learn more about dysfunctional beta males, like I talk about in this video, you can learn, and the way they behave and why they're behaving like this, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find it on Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. And if you want to see me make more men's issues videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, Taking Care of Business. The man who rules the world breaks in a brand new partner to help him take care of business in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get John Haynes taking care of business at paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere.